Hey, welcome. I'm Debra Hadsall, and today I'm going to read to you a message that I gave in 2013 in Port Isabel United Methodist Church. And Port Isabel is in Texas, and it's on the Gulf Coast. And that Terry and I were members of that church for about 6 years. And while we were in Port Isabel, I had felt called as a United Methodist woman to do some things differently in the church. So the pastor and I looked around and we felt like the women in the church were doing great. We didn't have any youth in the church and we didn't have any children, and that's what we chose to focus on. 10 years later, what I'm going to talk to you about is still happening, and it was really seeded and started and planted because of training that I had received as a United Methodist woman, because the pastor was very, very interested in pushing from outside the boundaries of the church into the community. And she and I were probably not the most likely candidates to start something like this. So it's called Fearless, the Master and the Mentors. I am reading it from the screen. This is not my story alone. This story belongs to a lot of students, school administrators, counselors, and volunteers that were women, originally from under the United Methodist Women umbrella, and women from the church who then joined us, and it's been quite an extraordinary story. It is 2020 right now. It is the spring of 2020. We are deep into pandemic, and there is a lot of fear, and that's understandable. So this is a message about not being so fearful, about not putting God in his box, and pushing outside into the community to do things. So I'm going to read from the screen. My presentation may not be brilliant, but one thing we did differently in mentoring is along the way, I documented things, and we have reports, and we have this sermon, this message. We have pictures, we have materials left over from when we worked with the students. So we have a record of what happened, and that's not very common in any kind of mission or ministry over the years. Sometimes it just kind of comes and goes. So I'm going to read. Fearless, the Master and the Mentors. Today I'm going to talk about fear and faith, just like we've been learning about it in the series of sermons Reverend Cherie has presented over the last few weeks. I speak as a layperson, just like you, and as part of a team of women from this church who have had the opportunity over the last 3 school years to be mentors to young women, most of whom have been together since junior high school in a program called Breakfast Club. It is now called Lunch Bunch and 4 O'Clock Club. These are young women who deal with lots of barriers to success, such as little or no parenting, poverty, a culture of teenage pregnancy starting at age 13 or 14, acceptance of violence as a way to deal with day-to-day conflicts, and just an overall lack of what we consider a normal support structure. Some are from loving families, many are not. One of the most interesting things I learned about these girls is they all agree they are different. We don't pretend that the regular high school life is happening to them. The mentoring is personalized to meet their needs. Today's message combines the teachings in the last chapter of Max Lucado's book, Fearless, Imagine Your Life Without Fear, and the things I experienced as we worked with the mentoring students. Each mentor has a unique view of the last 3 years, and I hope you will ask her to share her feelings and experiences. One thing for sure, collectively we had concerns or fears about how the ministry and mission would work. So what does this mentoring have to do with today's teachings? The title of the last chapter of the book is Fear of God, Getting Out of My Box. Fear of God, Getting Out of My Box. I was pretty excited when Reverend Cherie gave me the book to read as I prepped for today. I saw a good fit for what we had encountered in establishing and launching the mentoring program. And I have a hair here that's driving me crazy. Okay. There was no roadmap to follow. This hadn't been done by volunteers, and we weren't even sure the students would accept us. We knew a few things about fear. I thought, perfect fit. Then I read the chapter and began to understand that it wasn't directly about us getting out of our box. It was about our fear of God not doing what we expect him to do, and God not being in that limited box where we like to put him. It was a great reminder that as human beings, we tend to place our limitations on God, and he is limitless. During the scripture, we heard about planting seeds. Any mission or ministry work is really just that, planting seeds. However, sometimes our fears keep us from planting seeds in new, untested ground. Ground which may not be so fertile, which may be down the road and not just in the backyard. It may require more attention and tending to than we are used to providing. I like the way we are taught to understand how Jesus refused to be put in a box. He was a Jew who chose to move around among Gentiles. That was very unheard of and very unacceptable during his time. He was a rabbi without a synagogue, even though many wanted him to have one or a collection of them. We know Jesus sought out those considered undesirable, such as lepers and prostitutes. In a male-dominated society, he recruited women. Remember the resurrection women? When Rome bashing was popular, he chose not to participate. He could have lived like a king, yet he moved around the community. He taught us a lot about planting seeds. He showed us how not to put God in a box. Our hope in volunteering for the mentoring program was that we would meet at least one young woman who would experience a positive change in her life and see us, as Christians, as part of that evolution. Just one. If just one less pregnancy occurred, if just one student started going to church, if just one student saw kindness, patience, and understanding as an alternative to violence, we felt we could consider our work a success. We actually received much more, but we still had to move beyond our fears. I want to acknowledge the original mentor, Sue Hansen, who is now retired as a junior high counselor here in Port Isabel, and she has become one of the volunteer mentors. Sue Hansen is the one who had the wisdom and the vision to gather these students together and keep the program going. To me, she was really fearless in her love of the students. She learned how to balance the administrative work with the face-to-face connection to the students. She was the first to plant the seeds of hope in this group of young women. Well, a little fear is healthy. It forced us to plan, think, communicate, pray, and accept. We accepted that we would do our best and prayed it would be good enough. These were our major fears. First, what if the girls wouldn't want to have us as a group leader or as group leaders? They had been gathered together by a wonderful junior high counselor. She had a history with them. We didn't. She had been trained as a counselor. Most of us hadn't. She was in the school system. We weren't. What if they quit before we started? Next, would the school let us be volunteer mentors? What if they rejected us? What if the school principal didn't like the program? What if the school board didn't trust us because we were from United Methodist? Let's go to the next page. Women. And the local United Methodist Church. This was a strong concern because we live in a predominantly Hispanic community with a large Catholic presence. Would the priests complain? Was the school board open enough to admit maybe there was a need for this program in the high school? It had only been done in the junior high school. Did they acknowledge the needs of this group of students? Would mentor volunteers who could feel comfortable with students and be accepting and non-judgmental come forward? We have church women who travel a lot. Could we get enough volunteers to always have 2 mentors at a meeting? Money. What would it cost? UMW operates on a very small budget. Would we have enough money to do what was needed? Could we even define what was needed? Would we be accepted? I think on some level we, as adult women, feared rejection, at least just a little. We are a group of white women who live on the other side of town and are older. These students often have grandparents who are in their 40s, so we might seem kind of old and out of it to them. Would who we are stop them from coming? Could we even get in the front door of the school? I am from Colorado. My number one concern was that Reverend Sue, who was the pastor when we started this program and also a volunteer mentor, and I wouldn't even get into the school to talk to Mrs. Hanson at the junior high school to see what we could do to help. Schools are not always comfortable with outsiders, especially those representing religious organizations and wanting to get near students. In Colorado, I do not believe we would have even had that first meeting. Then there is the issue of control. We are no longer in this safe church environment where we knew how things worked. It takes a whole different level of organization and a willingness to go with the flow when the school is your sponsor and the administrators, teachers, and students are more comfortable there than you. We were the visitors for sure, and that clearly brought with it the recognition that our control was limited and that God's was not. All these fears. Now as we have learned together to walk with faith and to walk more fearlessly, still stumble over that fear word, I know these fears were rather insignificant. When I look back on the fun times we have shared with the students, the life-changing events we were there to coach a couple of girls through, the changes we see in them and in us, I know how silly our fears were. We discovered that the girls liked us just fine. They actually appreciated being around older women because so many do not have grandparents or great-grandparents around them like they used to. This is because some have families in Mexico, and with the violence there now, it's not okay to travel to visit. They still don't like to come to our side of town. Several have attended church, but as long as we go to them, things work. The school board was open and excited about our efforts. I was stunned when, after I finished our first presentation to them, one board member said, "Thank you for caring about our children." I was touched, and it gave me insight. I don't think the students and administrators really know how much a lot of people they have never met really do care. We have been blessed with mentors who have provided two of the most important qualities required: an open mind and a commitment to show up consistently. What is important to the students is that a mentor listen and be a calm and warm presence in their lives. We were surprised to discover that fresh fruit and cheese squares on toothpicks were such a big deal, things we take for granted. So the Lord provided, and we have been blessed. Our financial needs have been modest but still important. Through donations and funds received from our annual tea, we were able to provide refreshments at meetings, start a scrapbooking activity, and take about 16 girls to end-of-year luncheons at a nice local restaurant. You see, these students don't eat in those places that you and I go on a regular basis. The first encounter with the local establishments has usually been as employees. We help them explore new food items from the menu and work on showing them how to be comfortable and confident in public. Finally, that issue of control. God is in control. We know it and experience it throughout every step of this mentoring program. Through the seeds He has helped us to plant, we are experiencing growth in our mission. This year, one of our mentors, Lana Hunter, who's an RN, is working with the high school counselor to offer a young mom's connection. This is life skills education support for new moms and moms-to-be, something we have dreamed of the first year we were in school, and now it is happening. Also, because of the vision of two mentors and a volunteer in the Redeemed Treasury Ministry of the church, we now have in place a scholarship education fund. Contributions to the fund have already started. Although I don't know where or how we will have funds to distribute, I have learned that God truly does provide. Before we close in prayer, I want to ask each of you to think about a mission or a ministry which has been on your heart and in your thoughts. If fear is getting in the way of taking just that first step, let God out of the box you created for Him, and remember your limitations are not His. Ask Him for some help, and like the commercial says, just do it. You have no idea where God will take you. For me, going to the high school now feels as comfortable as going to this church. Recently, Sue Hanson and I went to the birthday party of one of the students who lives in the Heights. And if you don't know, the Heights is an area in Port Isabel that is kind of like a project. the projects in the big cities. This too now feels comfortable. Who would have thought? Will you please bow your heads in prayer? Dear Lord, we thank you for giving us the opportunity to serve and for opening so many doors for us, even though we expected them to be closed. We pray for the health and welfare of the mentoring students, and we give you praise for giving us the resources to continue. And this is dated November 2012, but I'm pretty sure that I did it in the spring of 2013 because we were moving to Port Isabel. So in closing, I'm moving to Fredericksburg, Texas, which is north, about 6 hours. It's outside San Antonio, and it is in the hill country of Texas. So in closing, the reason I did this video is this activity's had longevity. Port Isabel is in the 10th year. It's evolved and changed. The project activity that we were hoping to do with the new moms never took wings, but so many others did that hadn't happened at the time I wrote this. So they are in their 10th year there. Their UMWT is now called the Church Tea, and that tea has become really successful. Every door we needed to have open, the Lord opened and sent us these talented people that took the tea party to a level that I could never take it. When we moved to Fredericksburg, there was interest in this mentoring activity. We call it Lunch Bunch. And so I was fortunate to be involved with it until recently, so over 6 years' time. It's evolved and grown, done things we didn't do in Port Isabel. We did things in Port Isabel that we didn't do in Fredericksburg, because you adopt the process and you adapt it to your needs. So at this time, I just encourage you to look at fear a little differently. Just like you, I get scared. But we had never anticipated this would go on this long. The girls that graduated from the class of 2014, which are the ones I talk about in this message, have all gone on, pretty much all of them, to graduate. The teen pregnancy rate was nominal, which was not usual. Cameron County had the highest teen pregnancy rate in the country at the time, right before we started this. Over time, people have always asked me, as Reverend Sue moved on to a new church and they knew she had participated, Reverend Sue Huntsman, in this work, and people began to know about it. And there was a little bit in the newspaper about it, and one of the Methodist magazines or newsletters down in the Lower Valley did a little writing. People would just ask me, how do you do it? And I got tired of explaining it. So, as I said before, I'm the storyteller, I'm the connector. I'm the one who says, yeah, this worked, this didn't, because boy, we did make some mistakes, but we did things that we didn't know would work, and they did. The kids are great. We have brilliant young people in this country. We just need to let them get to it. So I wrote a book, and it's a very little book. It's called Life Skills for Mentoring for Groups of Girls and Young Women in Public Schools. Working in the public schools is really different, and it takes a different mindset. And we had great relationships in both of the school districts that I've been around, but that doesn't always happen with volunteers. So this is just a teeny little book, but it tells the story of all these things that happened and how you can use that to your advantage. So thank you for listening. I'm just a layperson. I am a passionate United Methodist woman. I give the United Methodist women huge credit for teaching me how to be ministry in ministry. I know a lot of stuff about managing programs and leading things and doing stuff. Not that leadership is any better skill or gift than others, it's just one. It's just I write and I see things. So I don't think if I hadn't been so heavily tutored by the late Reverend Dr. Marty Zimmerman and all the wonderful women in United Methodist Women, I don't think I would have ever had the courage to do this. And so figure out something that's good for you. And this happened to have longevity. And my studies that I did at the end, because now all of a sudden becoming some kind of expert about group mentoring, is that longevity is the key. And longevity doesn't happen very much. There are not a lot of documented, reports or stories about the impact that a long-term activity has on the community, the volunteers, the students, the schools, whatever. I do know from talking to the women in Port Isabel now that things are better, that it has improved down there. And I think a lot of those students that made some different decisions than they might have had without a little guidance had a lot to do with that. So thanks for listening, and I'm the director of Women's Financial Connection. If you want to, which is financial literacy for girls and women, if you need to get in touch with me, you can email womensfinancialconnection@gmail.com. If you're not a Methodist, this doesn't matter. This is about people and faith and action and taking a chance and not putting God in a box. Thanks.